How's it going, guys? Just want to do a little video on a issue that I have with my motorcycle that I recently purchased. I'm sure a lot of you already know these and what it is, but I have this is I believe it's called the primary cover on the side of the Harley Davidson, and there's this well, that's the cover, and I guess this is the plate. I'm not sure the technical terms, but this is removable. As you see, there's 5 screws here, and when you change the oil inside this primary, you just go ahead and you dump it right in here. There's a drain bolt under here somewhere. I just changed the oil on it, and when I put this back together, I noticed that this screw, out of all the screws, which these two would be the worst case to strip out because they're on the low, but it is stripped out. And it actually, maybe it wasn't that one, maybe it was this one. I gotta put a ratchet on it and we'll see. But what had happened is the previous owner, and I think it's pretty common on these, Harleys to strip out these bolts. I think people over tighten them. You know, they just need to be snug. They don't have to be that tight. And this is an aftermarket cover that has a different style gasket. I think the original cover would have a rubber O-ring. This actually uses a gasket to seal, which I'm actually surprised that it's not leaking. I put it back together while I ordered the kit that I'm going to show you in a minute to be able to repair the threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, let's find out what, okay, that one. Okay, yeah, so it is this one. As you can see, I tried to snug it up the best that I could, you know, in the meantime until I got the correct kit. But if you go to tighten this, like I'm not applying much pressure, maybe pinky pressure, and you can see it just keeps going. It does not tighten up. So what has happened is the threads, if you were lucky, the threads on the actual bolt would just be the issue and you could just replace the bolt, but that's not the case. As you can see, there's little, see if that focuses, pieces of the threads came off right here, right out of the casing, so that the actual bolt threads are perfect. They're in really good shape. So it's the hole that's the issue. So what I did is I ordered this kit on Amazon. This is actually what's called quarter 20. It's 1/4 inch and 20 thread pitch bolts that hold this cover on. So I got this kit. It's a rethread kit, also commonly known as a Helicoil kit, which is a brand name. It's kind of like you know, Kleenex is tissue, but you call it a Kleenex, or you know, Ziploc baggie is a brand of a locking baggie, and you know, Reynolds wrap is, you know, that type of stuff. But this is a generic, you know, whatever it was on Amazon. I don't even think they actually had a brand name, but it is a rethread kit. That comes with your new threads that you can install, that has these little steel inserts that's actually going to be better than the original. What you do is as you'll see in this video, you drill this old threads out, which are a little bit bigger, and you use this tap and you go ahead and cut new threads, but those threads are going to be bigger than what you need, so those wouldn't work. And that's when you install these coils. Like I said, they're called Helicoils by the brand name, but these are generic ones. And this screws into your new threads, and then that leaves you the inside with nice, fresh, very strong threads that you can screw your bolt back into without stripping it out. So pretty simple process. I figured I'd just show you and videotape it in case anybody else has this issue. I'm considering doing all of them because I know that they are susceptible to stripping. We'll see how long it takes me and how well it works out. And you know, I may just repair this one for now, and try tightening up the rest of them. We'll see. Also, when I take these bolts out, I'm gonna take note if any of the threads look damaged. If all the other ones are in good shape and it doesn't look like they've been damaged yet, I might just leave them and I'll hold on to this kit until a future time when it actually may strip out, because I'm sure at some point they will all strip out, because they are kind of a weak point on these bikes. Not really a weak point, it's just kind of a nuance. It's not that big of a deal. But so we're gonna go ahead and show you the process. Now I apologize ahead of time. Anytime that I seem to want to make a video that's outside, there's always some type of work going on in my neighborhood. My neighbor is having his stumps ground, and as soon as I started making this video, the truck pulled up and they started firing up the machine. So you probably hear that in the background. Hopefully it's not too annoying. But let's get going on this. Just gonna lay down a rag so we don't scratch this cover or lose the existing bolts. Go ahead and pull this puppy off. I think what happens is a lot of times, like maybe the original factory cover that was on here may have leaked, because like I said, you have to take this off every time you change the oil and reseal it, and if you don't replace that O-ring, you know, it could leak. And I think what somebody does is assumes that it just needs to be tighter, and then they go ahead and tighten these screws up and then over tighten them and strip them out, because you know, these plates, you tighten them up, all it does is it pushes the O-ring in a certain amount, and then it's metal on metal. That plate can't go any tighter. It's basically just at a stopping point, and the O-ring inside is now compressed a little bit, and that's what makes the seal. It doesn't matter how tight, how much more tight that you make any of these screws, as long as it's tight enough to the point where it's compressed that O-ring, it's now the metal casing hitting the metal casing. It can't tighten anymore. So a lot of people make that mistake and try to tighten it up with the screws, and you just can't. The actual problem is you need to replace the O-ring. So again, this one is a flat panel with this gasket. You can see this is the aftermarket gasket setup. The original would have a groove, I believe. Now I may be wrong, this may be a different style than the last one I did, but at some point they had a O-ring that goes around. This casting would come way into here, and there'd be a little O-ring groove all the way around this edge, and that would just push right up against this surface here and seal. So even, you know, doesn't matter what the case is, if you don't have this cover and you have the factory style with the O-ring, this still applies. You still have the same issue. These bolts do not go all the way through. The holes do not go through into the cover on the inside, because then if that was the case, when we drill these out and tap them, the shavings would have a chance of falling inside of the you know, inside of the primary, which would be a bad thing. So you'd have to use you know, get some grease to hold the shavings, and maybe a vacuum, or, you know, stuff a paper towel, something to be able to stop those shavings from ending up inside of your case. So in this situation, we can tell by, you can see that they all bottom out, which means they're enclosed, so the shavings have nowhere to go but out. So we're going to put a rag all on the inside in here, just to prevent any shavings that may fall from going inside there. And I'm going to go ahead and start drilling. Now this procedure could apply to almost any, I shouldn't say almost any car, bicycle, motorcycle, chainsaw, piece of equipment, anything that has a threaded hole, this procedure can work on. And they make a helicoil or a thread repair kit for pretty much any size bolt out there. So rather than replacing this whole cover just because of a stripped hole. We're able to salvage it and continue to use it. So just want to make sure it's good and sealed up. Alright, so this is the bad hole right here. So what I like to do is, this process starts with a drill bit. We need to drill this out to make it a little bigger to be able to accept these new threads. Okay, so that'll be step one, drill it out. Step two, we're going to tap these new threads. Step three, we take this little tool. Okay, there's a little piece that goes across that this slides into, just like that. That allows you to turn these threads in like a screw would. And then we're going to go ahead and screw this in and insert the new threads like it's its own screw, and that stays in there forever. That never comes back out. You leave it in there, and then the inside becomes your nice new threads. And then at the very end, you take this little tool here. It's like a little punch, and you whack that cross piece that's in the back, and it breaks off. It's designed to break off, and then that will just come right out, so it's not stuck in there, and you're left with those nice new threads that are, like I said, stronger than the original. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to equip the drill with this drill bit. But what I want to do is, when I'm drilling this, I want to be careful not to drill in too deep, because if I went too far, I could actually go through that cover and then into the primary case, and then in a whole nother world of problems. Then, you know, we got oil leaking out, and the metal shavings and whatnot can end up inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screwdriver. I'm going to push this in so I know how deep it is. I'm just going to mark it with my finger so I know that's how deep the hole is. Okay, and then I'm going to line that up on this drill bit, and I'm going to stick a piece of tape right in that exact location around the drill bit. So as I'm drilling, when I get to that piece of tape, I know to stop and not drill any deeper, because then I'd go through. So let me grab a piece of tape. I'll be right back. So I know right about there is my safe point. Just going to wrap some tape right around it. Okay. And now as we're drilling, don't want to go any further than that tape. Pardon my Home Depot special drill. I also have a ton of Milwaukee stuff, but as a secondary, you know, I'm at my house right now. I have a shop with all the Milwaukee and the really good stuff, but I like to keep this cheaper stuff on hand at the house just for projects around the house. So that's what we're using today. So I'm gonna go ahead and try drilling this as straight as you possibly can. Probably shouldn't have the shavings go on this cover here. Make sure we clean that off really good before we put it back in. Okay. Now if I had some compressed air, I would blow that hole out to get the rest of the shavings out, but I don't, so I'm just going to use Plan B. Okay. So now hopefully you can see that. We got a nice clean hole drilled. Next up, the tap. Now they make certain tap handles if you have a tap and die kit that you could put on this. I don't have one on hand. I do have one down at the shop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my own pair of vice grips. Now I have a nice handle to go ahead and tap this out. It's also a good idea to use a little bit of oil when you're doing this. Now, just like the drill, you want to try to keep this as straight as possible. You can apply a little light pressure. And you're just going to slowly turn, just like it was a screw or a bolt. We're working our way in, back and forth. Just so the excess shavings come out. And we don't want to go too deep and force this either. If it hits a stopping point, you don't want to force it and end up blasting through the cover. So I'm going to pull this out, clear the shavings, take a look. Okay, looking good. Go back in. All right, that's it. I'm hitting a wall. Back this back out. All right. Now we take our tool and insert right here. Put that on like so. Just like that. Make sure it's down just about a thread or two, just so it has a little bit of space to be able to tighten up. Now we're going to take this, break that little tab, felt it break, try to fish that out of there. Might be a little difficult. If not, no big deal, it can just stay in there as long as the bolt doesn't bottom out. Right there. You can see that little metal tang. Probably easier to see right here. All it is that little piece right here that goes across the thread. Like I said, a lot of people just leave them in there. It's not even necessary to pull them out. The only reason they put them on there is just so it gives you something to grip onto with this tool to be able to screw the threads in. After that, it's basically useless. So I'm going to go ahead and drill all of these out. Actually, before I do that, I just want to make sure that these are all the same depth. And they are. Tool has its little collar. Has a little stop. So I'll use a little pressure inwards while your friends insert it. Did I get that wings on now? There we go. Okay. Can be a little tricky to get started. Go ahead and run the tap one more time. Alright, and there you have it. All of these been replaced with nice new fresh heavy steel. So we're going to go ahead and put the cover back on and snug it up. Snug it up without over tightening it. Last thing you want to do. These threads are actually going to be stronger than they were from the factory, so they're going to be a little more forgiving for over tightening compared to the ones that the bike came with. But you need to learn these things. I don't know who it is out there that keeps over tightening things, but it's kind of common sense. The size of the diameter of the screw or the bolt that you're tightening coincides equally pretty much with how much foot-pounds or how much tension you're actually going to put on something. If you start tightening it and it feels like you're actually twisting the bolt, like you're putting enough power where you feel you're twisting the bolt, that's too much. Okay, it just needs to be snug. Yes, it's got to be tighter than hand tight, but you basically want to run something like a screw like this. You want to run it down till it makes contact. Another quarter of a turn will actually snug it up. So literally from here to here will snug it up. And then at that point you might want to just give it a little bit more. That's it. You do not need to like try to put as much force as you possibly can and keep trying to tighten these up. Does not need that. Go ahead and put this cover back on. Get our gasket. In case you're wondering, I did not remove the little horizontal tabs that we discussed earlier. These little cross pieces, I did not remove them in the other ones. I just left them in there. They're not going to hurt anything. They're not in the way of anything. It's not a danger for them to fall out and go anywhere. If the hole that we just rethreaded was open on the other end, and there's a possibility it could have broken off and fallen into the motor, I would have made sure to remove it. But it's basically a dead end hole. There's nowhere for it to go. As long as it's not in the way of tightening the bolt up and stopping it from screwing all the way in, it's not going to do any harm by leaving it there. You always want to start your screws and bolts by hand. Never just use a gun and try to line it up. And you know what, most of the time it's fine. Most of the time you could take a gun and you can just line it up, stick the screw there and pull the trigger and go. Probably 1 out of 100 times though, you're going to be a little bit off, and by the time that you realize that you were a little bit off, it's already cross-threaded and you've wrecked those threads. So you always want to hand start your screws or bolts. Make sure that you can get at least a turn or two by hand in, at least 1 or 2 full revolutions around before you know that you're seated in your threads properly. Okay, and just by hand we can snug them all up. Okay, so we got them all about to the same. By me doing this with just the extension and the socket, I can only tighten this so much. So I know I'm not over tightening now, so I'm going to tighten this as much as I can with this method, which then I'll know that they're equally tight all the way around. Okay, and then I'm just going to make sure this cover is nice and tight. The screws did go in all the way, it's nice and tight, and now I'm just going to snug them all up about 1/4 of a turn. Okay, so we're going to start horizontal, 1/4 of a turn, 1/4 of a turn. I just wanted to add the official torque spec. The official torque spec on this, and it's called the Derby cover, is 7 to 9 foot-pounds, okay? Which you could, if you have a smaller, if you don't have a foot-pound torque wrench, and you have an inch-pound torque wrench, you can take that 7 to 9, so we'll pick the middle, we'll say 8, and then you multiply that times 12 inches, and that's how you can convert to inch-pounds. So then you would have 96 inch-pounds. So you've got 8 foot-pounds on a foot-pound torque wrench, or 96 inch-pounds if you have a torque wrench. As you become an experienced mechanic, you kind of just get the feel for how tight certain things should be. And something like this, it's not as critical as, say, like a head, or you know, a head gasket or something like that, or a wheel, something that might, you know, fall off because you didn't tighten it enough. Things like that, or, you know, lug nuts on a vehicle. High priority items, I would definitely make sure to have a torque wrench and use your proper torque spec when tightening it up. Quarter of a turn. Oh, that one was a little loose. Still a little loose. There we go, quarter of a turn. By choking up on the ratchet and just not grabbing it way out here, you don't have that extra leverage. You're just using as if this ratchet was only this long, so that way you have less of a chance to over tighten when you're choking up on the ratchet like this. And see how I'm just tightening it up like this. Okay, so quarter of a turn. Already did this one, I believe, so now I'm just gonna equally, just with a twist of the wrist, get a feel for them. And I know that those are tight, okay? And there's a final shot, everything that I used. And we're back on the road. Nice and tight, no leaks. Crisis averted. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.